where the person might have been knocked unconscious, they will go back and relive every single experience that they went through in reverse order, according to the intensity of the trauma and according to the chronological order of it, and they will re-experience it fully on the conscious level and release it with love forever. This is why it is necessary to get the person trained in the concepts of the health and human mind, that they might understand how love is the transmuting factor. This is why they must understand that when they're going through a healing crisis, they need a continuation of the nutritional program, rather than stop the nutritional program when they start feeling quote-unquote bad. Now remember, the badness that a person is feeling is only the locked-in, suppressed traumas that the person has at one time literally suppressed and has experienced. Now the problem is to get them to re-experience it on the conscious level, that they might be able to release it on the physical level. Let's move on now to the lymphatics. And we talked briefly about this. We need to get the circulation restored to the body. And oftentimes the circulation is not going to do us a bit of good unless the nutrients are in the bloodstream, which comes from the nutrients that we're taking into our system. And to get it clear out to the lymphatic level, we find that we have to saturate the body and continue to saturate the body way past the time when zone 1 and 2 and 3 are feeling wonderful. Now we might have the digestive system working real good. We might have all the corn gone from the walls of the intestines, all the fuzzies gone, all of the fecaliths completely removed from the walls of the intestines, and that's working fine. We might have all the scar tissue gone from that area. But even though we have all of that area taken care of and moving out from zone 1, 2, and 3, the endocrine system is working fine, the heart's all healed, and so on, we find that the rest of the body isn't going to heal until the crystals are dissolved, which means we have to have the nutrients in the body going all the way out to the cellular level, clear out to the skin level, for example, through the entire capillary system, which is found in zone 6 and 7. And when we get it clear out there, at that point in time, then the body will begin to heal in those areas. So we need saturation of the nutrients. Let's talk about the skin for just a moment, because the skin, once we get it to the skin, we know we're getting it out through the lymphatics. Okay, we know we're getting it clear out to the capillary level. Now to get it to the capillary level, we use niacin. Niacin is used in sufficient amounts to create what we call a niacin flush on the body, which creates a vasodilation of the capillaries at the skin level, and your person gets red. Now, there's no sense in a niacin flush in and of itself, unless it is for a purpose. And the purpose of the niacin flush is to open up the capillaries so the nutrients that are taken at a saturation level are then able to move themselves out through the system, clear out to the capillary level, that the skin might be fed. Now, when the skin is fed properly with all the nutrients through the bloodstream, and you're getting the skin, shall we say, from the capillary level to the tissues out through what we call the interstitial fluid, which contains the trapped plasma protein and so on. At that time, the skin begins to heal, and believe it or not, the age spots will begin disappearing on the skin. The scar tissue from old sunburns and injuries will begin disappearing on the skin. The skin will clear up of old rashes and old problems that have been there for a long time, your acne and pock marks and what have you. And the skin will become beautiful and the same as a person in the prime of their life in perfect health. Now here's what will happen. And you need to understand this. And it'll happen more often than not. Sometimes you'll have a little flush on the skin and you'll have a niacin flush and that's all there is to it. That'll happen most of the time. But suddenly, when the person is physiologically prepared, in other words, the nutrients are there in mass, in saturation level, and the person is psychologically prepared, at that point in time, they will experience a niacin flush that might last for several hours. Hey, I mean several hours. It might be 4 hours. And during that time, you'll ask them, have you ever felt this way before? And they'll say no, as they're going through palpitating heart and they're going through their these purple flushes on the skin as they're going through nausea and headaches and so on. And you'll ask them, have you ever felt that way before? They'll say no. Now just wait a little while. Be sure to spray at that time the Schweitzer formula on their skin to increase the healing rate on their skin. And you'll find at that time that they'll re-experience an old sunburn. And you can take the clothes off and have them stand in front of the mirror and see the outline of old sunburns on the skin at that point in time. Now that's exciting, because they'll remember the time they got this terrible sunburn laying out and going to sleep on the beach at noonday, and getting the direct rays of sun on there and just getting a heck of a sunburn. They'll feel like they've got a sunburn. They may feel for a while like they can't walk. They may just feel like they're burning up all over, and they'll feel the heart palpitating from the sunburn. They'll re-experience the shaking from the sunburn. They'll re-experiencing the headaches and nauseousness and just total devastation that they had at the time they had this bad sunburn. Every single physiological feeling that they had and every emotion and every thought pattern will come back in reverse order as all of the breakup of scar tissue on the skin begins to heal. All that scar tissue is suppressed memory. And when that comes back to the consciousness, the person will re-experience it just like they had it when they suppressed it. Now, at the same time, all the salves and all the ointments that suppressed the pain, the solar cane and so on, all of that will come back out of the skin, and the skin will heal perfectly, and then the dark scurf rim on zone 7 of the iris of the eye will lighten up or entirely disappear. And I've seen that disappear on people. It disappeared on myself when I went through a healing crisis on the skin. You'll have interesting phenomena of all the toxins and poisons that have been locked into the skin will come out, and the skin will heal. Now, it'll be very interesting because the skin is an epithelium. It's epithelial tissue, and it is tied in to the lining of the intestines, and so there's a one-to-one correspondence between the lining of the intestines, which also is epithelial tissue, and the lining and the skin. And so oftentimes we'll have a healing crisis on the skin, and we'll have a corresponding healing crisis in the walls of the intestinal area, where we'll pass more corn and fuzzies and fecaless, and vice versa, because we've had people during a colonic irrigation, when the colon goes through a good healing crisis with a mineral implant which feeds the walls of the intestine and helps it to heal more rapidly. We've had people with niacin flushes while they're having good colonic therapy. So there's a tie-in now between the skin and the colon, and that's why sometimes with a niacin flush, as the skin heals, you might have a little diarrhea, and that is nothing more than a cleansing activity of the intestines. So kind of expect that. Now, I can tell you many cases of healing crisis on the skin. I remember one father called me, and all alarmed because his daughter, who was a bank teller, got on the program and was on the program with only the very first dose of the whole program they took. She took the niacin, and she turned purple. She couldn't walk. She couldn't bend her elbows. She couldn't bend her knees. And her father called me and all disturbed, wondering what happened to the daughter. Well, I saw the daughter because the daughter had a big black scurf rim. And she simply went through a time she got sunburned. And the father brought her over later on that evening, and her scurf rim entirely disappeared with that one healing crisis on her skin. Now, I might say that was a little devastating to her, because at first she didn't remember that she had had a sunburn. It had been totally suppressed. Memory was gone. But when, after a while, she remembered it in detail, re-experienced it lovingly, and it disappeared. One time, I remember in my own case, I had a line at the top of my boot level. I thought my boots were bothering me, but my leg was broken out with kind of little running sores all the way down my leg. It had been that way for about 10 years, and I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And every time I took niacin, it got worse. And one day, the smell of tough skin was permeating the room where I was sitting. And I remembered back all through high school and college where I played basketball, I always put tough skin on my leg and then wrapped up my ankles with bandages to hold my legs together, because I had very weak ankles through high school and college. And I needed that so I could play basketball. The joke was they called me the tissue paper athlete because I always had to be patched up with because my ankles were so weak and my knees were weak. I had to patch those up. I was growing so fast. I wasn't holding together very good. But anyway, all of this tough skin was just permeating the air, and I felt all this smell coming out of my right leg where my right ankle was the weakest. And as soon as that came out of my leg, then my ankle, my whole leg completely cleared up, and I haven't had any trouble with it since. I've had other people who have been on the program taking the niacin, and they re-experienced the different salves and ointments that contained, zinc and mercury and so on, that suppress different rashes, and poison ivy and poison oak, and they actually go back and re-experience the itching of the poison oak, and itching of the poison ivy that they experienced, and the different smells and stuff, the stuff actually come out of their skin where it was trapped at the cellular level. Now, you may not believe it until you experience it, but I'm telling you, this has happened to hundreds and hundreds of people. Even people who re-experience a tonsillectomy, the smell of ether that was locked into their tissues at the moment of the unconsciousness due to the anesthesia will be released into the air, and people who are holding points with body electronics will all experience that, and they'll all smell the ether around the people who actually go back through the tonsillectomy. So many of these, I'll use the word materials, which are unnatural to the body, during moments of unconsciousness or trauma, are locked into the tissues until the person can re-experience that trauma and can release it. And at that time, the body heals, and then it creates a condition where we no longer have those suppressed thought patterns, which we would then pass down to our future generations on the DNA level, and then our future children's will not have the inherited weaknesses that we have, and they'll be free from that. Anyway, going on here, we've talked now about the skin. I remember a very interesting story that I like to relate to you. This happened 7-8 years ago in Los Angeles. A lady with a large growth on the back of her neck. I didn't see the large growth because she was facing toward me all the time, and she sat down across the table from me. And I asked her what I could do for her, and she said, I want to be put on the program. So I looked in the iris of her eye, and I recall very clearly in the right eye, in the neck area, at about 10:15 to 10:30, there was a huge black spot in the iris of the eye, which took in about a third of the distance from the edge of the iris to the pupil. And it had little fingers going out from it, little pointed fingers going out from it. Now, this, of course, alarmed me a little bit, and I asked her if she had any problem with her neck area. And she says, young man, you have trouble with my neck area. She turned around, she had a huge growth on the back of her neck, the size of a large, I'll say a large grapefruit, a small cantaloupe. And I was very alarmed at that. And I didn't let her know what I was feeling inside because I felt rather sick from looking at it. But I remember looking at that, and I say, okay. And I remember from my own past experience with what we're dealing on, I put her on the program. Now, as I put her on the program, I put her on just a fresh and raw diet. She had to do away with her German pastry and all of her other goodies and sweet tooths and whatnot, and said, look, you've got to take care of this. She told me that she knew she had to take care of it because the doctor sent her home to die because the cancer had gone into the brain stem on one hand and the spinal cord on the other, and there was nothing more they could do for her. So they just told her to go get her affairs in order. Well, we went ahead and got on the program, and I gave the specific instructions to the host and hostess where I was there in the Glendale area. And she went on and left, and with a tape to listen to as to explain the nutritional program. Well, about 2 weeks later, I saw her in a home that I was working out of in just off of Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. And she came in and sat down across from me, and I didn't recognize her. And she said, young man, look what you've done to me. I said, what have I done to you? And I didn't know quite where she was coming from. And she said, look what you've done to me. I said, what was your name, ma'am? She told me she was Madame So-and-so, and she was this French singing instructor from Hollywood that I had treated up at Glendale. And so she came in and sat down across from me with all these red running sores all over her face. And then she turned around, and I saw this huge lump on the back of her neck. Then I knew who she was. And she had this moo-oo on because all the her whole body was just pouring out toxins and poisons. And this huge lump on the back of her neck in 2 weeks was just turning into a red, smelly, stinking mass of putrefaction. All the toxins and poisons were coming out of her. I looked in the iris of the eye, and here this big black blotch was sitting there, but all of those little pointed fingers were all nubbed off. And I looked at that, and I said, good. And I told her, I said, you're doing wonderful. Now, how in the world you convince an individual that they're doing wonderful when their body is covered with red running sores and all red, and her eyes were nearly closed. She could hardly see me. It was just all swollen up. Her face was just a mass of red and pimples and pus and stuff coming out of it. And you try to convince her she's doing fine. Well, I told her what was happening, and I drew her a diagram and showed her what was happening. All the little black nubs on that, the black feelers were all nubbing off there in that black blotch in the iris of the eye. And I told her she's doing just wonderful. There's nothing to worry about. Well, she stayed on the program, and I encouraged her to stay on the program. I'm very grateful she did, because as time progressed, next time I saw her, that lump was nearly gone. The discoloration, the black was turning to brown in the iris of the eye. And the last time I saw her, she came just a beautiful, beautiful lady with just a little bit of a ruddiness on the back of her neck where the lump used to be. And the body had totally eradicated itself from the lump. And she says, I've been invited to Paris to take a new score of musical score that has been accepted at a symposium in Paris. And she says, may I go? I said, how do you feel? She said, I've never felt better in my life. And she was beautiful. She looked like she had the skin of a young lady. She was tall and beautiful and wonderful. And last I heard, she was doing well in Paris. She decided to stay. She had a new lease on life, and she was determined that she was going to make the best of it. She was not going to work herself into the ground. I mean, this is a lady in her 70s now. She's doing just wonderful. A very prominent singing instructor there from Hollywood. Now, what took place is she had enough determination that no matter how bad she felt, no matter how much she passed in the way of corn and fuzzies and fecal lifts, the body healed from the inside out because she kept taking a saturation of nutrients. And the body had the capacity of healing itself. Now remember, I did not treat her. I did not heal her. She, because of her conscious attitude of lovingly and willingly enduring the pain, and by her desire of taking the nutrients in her body, healed herself. But she had to pay the price of cleaning all of the junk out of her body. I'm reminded of another lady in Chicago. She was a very high society lady, and she went with her husband to all these big business meetings. The husband was a director of this big corporation in Chicago. And she came to me and went on the program because she wasn't feeling too good. Now, the thing that happened to her is she broke out with this red rash all over her head and neck, and it covered the tank top. You know what a tank top is? Just across the, a semicircle across the chest, leaving the neck exposed. It was red down to there, and he had a perfect tank top there, and below that it was fine. That went on for 2 months. Her husband insisted she go to a dermatologist, and she wouldn't tell her husband that she was on the program. She kept on the program and kept complaining to me every few days that things were not improving. I told her to stay on the program with the veiled threat that if she didn't stay on the program, she'd be stuck right in the middle of the healing crisis. It might remain that way. And I was very serious when I told her that. It was no threat. It's just the way it is. But she, this is the way it was. 2 months later, all this junk came out of her skin. And then she came and admitted to me that she'd been using a hair dye spray all these years because she's about 7 years older than her husband, and she didn't want her gray hair to show. I remember I saw her at the National Health Convention there in Chicago. It was about 5 years ago. And I saw her, and doggone if her skin didn't look like a 17-year-old girl's skin. And here's a gal again in her late 60s. And she looked beautiful. And her skin had cleared up, the wrinkles were gone, the complexion was beautiful, and she felt absolutely wonderful. But this is what she had to go through: 2 long months of all the toxins and poisons coming out of the skin, where it had been blocked for many years by using this hairspray, and she always wore the same tank top outfit, and the hairspray actually got on all over her body. Well, there you have it. Now, I'd like to talk to you about another healing crisis that you need to be aware of. A gal came into Vista, California. She brought her 19-year-old daughter in, where her left leg was about 3 inches anatomically short. And the history of it was that it had been broken about, 3 inches below the knee and 3 inches above the knee and right at the knee, broken in 3 places. And she was 19 at the time. She broke her leg at the age of 9, and the left leg didn't grow the same as the right leg grew. So she had this big lift and so on, and she was an identical twin, I might add. But from the age of 9 onward, they were no longer identical twins, but the girl who had broken her leg would look differently from her identical twin, to where there's they were quite divergent in their looks. Now, what happened was, I didn't really know what the problem was, but the girl came in just kind of screaming, in pain. And nobody could do anything for her. She'd been to every doctor, every chiropractor, and nothing could be done for her, but the mother kept pumping fresh and raw juices down her, because she was very much into nutrition. Now, what had happened is the mother was pumping organically grown fresh juices, vegetable juices, fruit juices down the daughter, forcing her into the dissolving of the suppressed traumas that the girl had incurred at the age of 9, which the mother didn't know about, and the girl had suppressed completely, because when she was hit by a truck, when she was on a bicycle at night, she was left laying in the gravel for 1 solid hour, and nobody would come to help her, because nobody wanted to get, involved, because they might get sued for, practicing medicine without a license. So what happened? They left her lying there, but they did call an ambulance. Finally, the ambulance came and hauled her off to the hospital. The girl, of course, was in severe trauma the entire time with a broken leg. Well, what I did with body electronics is I touched the spot furthest from the head on the left leg where the break was, and just held it. And all of a sudden, she started screaming again at the top of her lungs. And there she was, no longer on the table in Vista, California. She was back there in the gravel at the age of 9, 10 years prior, going through the pain of her recent encounter with the truck when she was on a bicycle. And right before I imagine there are 18 to 20 people there. I just attended Dr. Bernard Jensen's lecture. This is in 79. The spring of 79, or when was it? It was in 78, and at the time, and I had attended Dr. Bernard Jensen's lecture, and in Escondido, and these folks wanted me to come over there to Vista. And what had taken place is all these people saw this leg move out and become the same length as the other leg as she re-experienced the trauma of the wreck. Now, during that time, her facial features totally changed. I hope you heard what I said. I said her face underwent a tremendous change in structure. Her mother, after it was all over, looked aghast at me and said she looks now identically like her twin sister. Now remember, from the age of 9, after this one identical twin had a wreck, the two no longer looked alike, and they gradually looked more and more different from each other to where they were very far apart, and you wouldn't have known that they were identical twins. But there was literally a transformation that took place where one looked just like the other. Now, when there is a change in consciousness, you will always find a change in structure, because the physical body is an outer manifestation of inner consciousness. Now what I'd like to do is to try to explain a little bit about personology. Where personology is a study of the structures of the body with statistical correlation to personality traits, which are more or less a reflection of your thinking. So people, according to personology, will act according to how they are structured to act, where we recognize that the outer manifestation is literally a manifestation of internal consciousness, which is dependent then upon the thought patterns, where as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And so when we change the inner consciousness, the outer structures all will change, and personology gives us a tool by which we can measure the structures of the body, and especially the structures of the head, where we know that there has been a change in consciousness. Now, as a healing crisis go on in an individual, especially with cranial and, shall we say, back work, and we changed this. We removed the blockages in the spine and removed the blockages in the sutures which connect the bones together in the head. And there's tremendous movement and tremendous change of structure, and accompanying with that a tremendous change in personality. Now remember, changing the structure changes the personality. Let me give you an example. Just today, was it today? Just a moment. Was it today or was it yesterday? It was yesterday. Yesterday, a lady here in Wisconsin, who is a school teacher, came up to Manitowish Waters with her father, who is in school administration as a principal. And she 2 years ago was in a very severe snowmobile wreck where she was thrown 20, 30 feet up in the air and down on her head on a pavement. Now, of course, this left her like a vegetable. And everyone thought she was going to be a vegetable, and she started on the program, and we were able to do work on her to bring her out of this state of inability to do much of anything. Now, when we were able to work with her on the whiplash neck just yesterday, in addition to the color of her teeth changing right in front of her father and about 5 other people who were there as witnesses, and she had a mirror there watching her teeth color change. We're simply dissolving the calcification on the 3rd cervical vertebrae, where she also, we found, was the source of a whiplash from falling on her head. Okay. Now, in addition to that, she experienced severe pain on her head, and she re-experienced landing on her head on the pavement, and the bone structures where there were tremendous ridges in the sutures between the temporal and the parietal bones, those all came out. Now, let's put it this way. For 2 years, she has not been able to play the piano. And here she is a school teacher. She's also a pianist, and she hadn't been able to play the piano for 2 years. She'd sit down there, and she couldn't get the notes coordinated with her fingers. But right then she was able to go over to the piano that we have in our basement and played Pachelbel's canon on the piano, and she played it very nicely after 2 years, and she coordinated it perfectly, and boy, was she happy. And the father was happy, because this was an instantaneous blockage that was removed, and the head structures, instead of having these huge suture ridges in the head became well rounded off. Now, there's still more work to be done. And from that, we can determine that from the fact that she had had a definite concussion from the sclera of the eye. But we have more work to do there. But the fact remains is she was able to do things and sustain that over a period of time without going off into a fogginess or an inability to complete something. Now, there was a definite change there. There's a change in several things that we won't get into. But what I'm saying is that the head structures changed. And with that, it's an indication that there was a personality change. So injuries can cause personality disorders, and when we correct the injuries by lovingly and willingly enduring the traumas that we re-experienced, with all of the complete memory, the pain, the yelling, the screaming which she went through, all of this what she went through, with the memory of the pain and re-experiencing the pain, then the bone structures changed, and then the personality will change. And in this case, the personality being simply an ability to play the piano. Now, who knows how far-reaching that is to other things that she couldn't do. This is yet to be determined by observation over the next several weeks. Now, let me go back to some basic fundamental things we need to look at. One question we always ask people, when did you feel that way before? And they will always answer what? They don't remember when they felt that way before. The memory does not come until after the person goes through the pain. Now, when a person is going through a healing crisis, if they are starting from scratch, which is at the bottom of the scale, the body part will go numb. Example. We want to talk about numbness for a while. The numbness might be in a hand, like in the left arm or left hand, and they might suddenly be in recovering or remembering a full-fledged heart attack which would show up as a red blotch in the sclera of the eye in the heart area. And after they have gone through the pain in their heart, the shortness of breath, and whatever they experienced during a real traumatic event, then the numbness from the hand and arm will go away, the red blotch will disappear, the I can't breathe is gone, and they feel a warmth going on in their heart area, and there will be a reconstruction going on where the heart will have gone through a reconstruction of whatever damage was done to it. Now, you might say the scar tissue will disappear and the heart will return to its full normal function. Now, this is something I know a little bit about. And with body electronics, we go in a great deal on the heart. But if a person has been in the intensive care unit, they will re-experience their unconsciousness, the trauma, the pain, the I can't breathe and so on. The actual, if the heart stopped, they fibrillate the heart, they will experience the electric shock that brought about the heart back to its normal function again. And they will re-experience all of these things on the table during point holding, especially if they're nutritionally prepared. Now, the thing is a person, if they had gone through a time where they had a heart attack and they stopped breathing, they will re-experience that in the healing crisis, and you have to be prepared for this. Now, if you're dealing with somebody who has had a heart condition in the past, then you better get the tapes on body electronics and listen all the way through that before you start fooling around with point holding, or at least have an instructor there who has been through point holding on people who have had heart conditions. Because when you take a person through a condition in their heart where the numbness is there in their arm and they go numb, they can't breathe, they quit breathing, they turn purple, you'd better be prepared to handle it. Up in Bismarck, North Dakota, I had a man, we straightened out his spine in the lumbar area that he'd had since birth, a very, very crooked spine. Worked all day on it. And after Warren worked on Johnny Johnny was in his 70s, he was 74, I believe, at the time. And after Warren worked on Johnny all day long, the spine was perfectly straight. Johnny sat up saying, I feel wonderful. His spine was straight, his hips were straight, everything was straight. And then he quit breathing. And a long story, okay, but basically what happened is after about 30 to 40 seconds of no breathing and turning purple, he then came out of it with full memory of the intensive care unit. He said, oh, I forgot to tell you, he says in his German accent, that wasn't a German accent, but in his German accent he said, I forgot to tell you, he says, when I was 64, I was in the intensive care unit of the hospital with a heart attack. Well, he went through the heart attack. Now, this is something that I didn't expect. And this is why you need to have some sort of a history of the individual. And sometimes they don't put everything down on in their history. They forget to tell you that they had an operation. They forget to tell you that they nearly died on the operating table. They forget to tell you about the heart attacks they had. And these things that you ought to know, because the person must be on a nutritional program before you work with the heart, so that you can take them all the way through the heart attack, so they'll re-experience all of the symptoms that they had during their heart attack, so that they'll be back, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with a new heart after the heart has regenerated. And you have to have enough nutrients in the body to carry them through all the way through the healing crisis that they will go through. Now, that's very vitally important. Well, let's get back to numbness. Had a man in Indiana, and the man came up to me after a point-holding session. He says, I'm all numb. I says, you're numb? And then I explained to him about numbness and the healing crisis. And he came back to me a little bit later. He says, I don't think you understand. He says, I'm numb. I said, where are you numb? He said, in the front. I said, oh, in the front. Okay. And I explained to him more about the healing crisis. He says, you don't understand. I'm numb in the front. And I said, the front. And then he explained to me that his entire testicle area, everything back to the rectum area, the anus area, all that was numb. And frankly, it was numb for quite a while. Then I explained to him how this was the beginning of the healing crisis. He was on the table. He had run out of electrolytes, and so he had the cycling and the burning and throbbing, as you understand from the body electronics tapes. And so the healing crisis was stuck in the middle of it. Now, he had to continue with the nutritional program to get him off of dead center and move him on through the healing crisis. That took about 2 weeks. Now, his wife was very concerned about it because nothing was working. And, I hope you understand. I'm just getting right down to bare essentials here. Now, what happened then was the fellow did not remember that he had a hernia operation, and that in that operation in the hospital he was numb for several weeks, where exactly the same numbness was re-experienced in that area. And he had forgotten about it because, when you're in the hospital, after an operation, they keep you drugged up and keep you on pain pills, so you don't really remember what happened. But all that was re-experienced consciously, and the numbness went away, and he was fine afterward. Now, we've had a number of experiences of that, where body parts have been numb for an extended period of time. And when a person is psychologically ready to go back and relive the time that they were numb, then they'll go through it. I know one person, the top of their head was numb for about a month. Somebody else's their side of their neck was numb for a couple of weeks. Other parts of their body were completely numb. I remember one person had 3 toes numb for about 2 months until they remembered going through a electrical shock which went through their body, down their leg, and out through their 3 toes. And when they went through that experience, then the toes came back to life. So all of these have to do with healing crisis that we're dealing with. I hope you understand. But numbness is the first thing that comes out. Then with the numbness, next is the emotion of apathy. As a person's comes up scale and vibratory rate, which is the I can't handle it, I can't take it anymore, I can't do anything about it, nobody loves me, I might as well die, type of thing. Then they come up to grief, and here's where they cry about it. Then they come up to fear, where they feel I can't take anymore and I'm going to get out of here no matter what you do. At that time, you better have educated them ahead of time, so they're willing to stay on the table and have their points held and bring them up to the healing crisis, or you might not see them for a couple of years. Now, you think I'm kidding? I have little experience in this area. So here's where we need to educate the people on the healing crisis ahead of time, that when they come up to fear, that fear can be absolute terror, and they've got to get out of there no matter what. They don't realize what they're running away from is something that they don't remember yet, and they're simply re-experiencing the fear which lays embedded in their crystalline structures, which is dissolving in their body. It might be a fear of running away from somebody when they're 2 years old, when they're afraid of the dark, but they don't know that. They have no memory of it, but they still have the feeling of fear. And then after fear comes the anger, and they come up through the anger. Okay, be ready for it, and realize that the anger will come out. And a person can certainly sit there lovingly and willingly enduring the anger without venting it on everybody that they're holding points on, or that's holding points on them. Then they come up finally to pain. And here's where they go through the excruciating pain of the trauma, and they re-experience it lovingly, just like it happened to them. And then they move up to pain, to enthusiasm, and when they hit enthusiasm, they don't mind that it hurts. And the pain disappears, and everything becomes energy, and everything is transmuted with love. Now here's where the key word is: lovingly and willingly endure the pain. When a person is willing to do it, this helps to bring it up because they're willing to receive that which is already there. And then when they love it, they transmute it as they are receiving it, eliminating it forever, because they're putting out love continually in their mind for every single experience that they're passing through, with a feeling of gratitude connected with it. Now, in this day and age, I'd like to get into another subject now. Let's talk about drugs. Drugs. Had a lady call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. She was behind a couch in her front room. All the doors were locked. She had her hands up over her head, and she was screaming at the top of her lungs, "I'm freaking out." And I said, "When have you felt this way before?" She said, "I've never felt this way before. I've been on the program faithfully. What's happening to me? What are you doing to me?" I told her, "Well, have you ever been on drugs?" She said, "Well, yes, years and years ago. I haven't had any drugs for 10 years. "Well, have you ever felt like this before?" "No." I asked her just by chance. I said, "Have you ever been on any LSD?" And she says, "Well, yes." "Have you ever had any bad trips?" She said, "Well, only one." I said, "Do you remember that bad trip?" "Oh, yes." She said, "I was behind the couch in the living room with my arms up over my head, freaking out with paranoia, just like I am right now." And the feeling totally left her. Just like that. It left her. And she was free of that feeling, and she felt, then she understood what a healing crisis was. Because that which has been suppressed will return to you. Now, what are flashbacks? A person gets on drugs. They have a bad trip. It's all suppressed because they can't handle it. That's why it's a bad trip. They start taking a vegetarian diet, and all of a sudden they're back in their bad trip again, and they have what they call a flashback. All the flashback is the LSD locked in the tissues, is being rejected by the tissues, back out into the bloodstream again, symptoms identical to how it was before as the body gets rid of the LSD, and you reverse the whole procedure. The same thing with your marijuana. Now we know how marijuana blocks the pain. And people who take marijuana, like they take it for glaucoma, they take it for cancer, why do they take it? It kills the pain. And so people who are on marijuana, they can't go through a healing crisis because it blocks the pain, just like DMSO blocks the pain, or like any painkiller blocks the pain. And so we have to encourage people to get off all of their pain-killing drugs. We have to encourage them to get off their DMSO. We have to encourage them to get off their marijuana so they can go through the pain, go through the healing crisis, come up through enthusiasm, unlock the tissues, and so that the tissues will heal, and then transmute it with love. Many, many people today, because they understand the healing crisis, they're dropping marijuana. They're just dropping it. They say, I want no more of it, because they see how damaging it is to the body. And by being a pain blocker, like DMSO is a pain blocker, you can see the fiber structures moving right back into the pigment layer, where the fibers become very, very dark, due to the fact that the drugs, the marijuana, the LSD, not the LSD so much, but as marijuana and the different pain-killing drugs, the DMSO does kill and block the person from feeling the pain. And so we encourage everyone who is on marijuana to drop it, get on the program, and go through the healing crisis, because as long as you're taking marijuana, you're not going to go through a legitimate healing crisis. You'll get some progress up to a point, but you have to go through the pain in order to get the full emotional problem out and into the open, so you can experience it with love and release it forever. Now, I would really want to stress these words. And please don't vary from these words in helping to bring a person through the healing crisis. This is not idle. These are words that were given to me word for word as a result of prayer. And you find the story on that in Health in the Human Mind seminar. But I want to re-stress this. The words are, lovingly and willingly endure the pain. On the other hand, we should learn to lovingly and willingly endure all things, every single experience of life, with gratitude, because the very things that we resist in our life, that we're unwilling to lovingly and willingly endure, we will perpetuate in our life. And through our resistance, which is less than unconditional love, the thing that we hold ever present in a state of creativity is the very thing that we resist. And that's why the thing that we hate most in our lives is the thing that keeps coming up over and over again for us to experience. And it's very simple. The physical universe is an outer manifestation of inner consciousness. And that which we resist, we perpetuate. That which we resist, we create. That which we resist, we hold in a continual state of creativity. And if you sit and really take a look at these words, lovingly and willingly endure all things, this will help you to go through any healing crisis, no matter how minute, no matter how great in magnitude, and you'll bring it through totally to where you eventually come to an encompassment of unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness, where you're able to transmute all the negativity and release those experiences and those outer manifestations of both your body and external environment from your life, and be free of that forever.